parks to you while you're stuck at home. So while the parks are closed and off limits to everyone right now underneath the governor's orders, we have special permission to be out so that we can bring you a little bit of nature in case you're stuck indoors. So like I said, we're at the DeMolay Nature Preserve on Fox Island. It's also known as Bella Bella Beach to some of the locals because it's on Bella Bella Road. And a lot of people know it as just the Fox Island Sand Spit. And it's this beautiful spot of land that stretches and kind of sticks out, forms a little bit of a peninsula. And it's we've got a lower tide today than we've had in the past. So what we're gonna do is explore a little bit. Hopefully you can hear me. I know, very windy. I can't really control the wind. Can't control my hair either. But we're gonna point out some interesting animals to you. If you would help us out by posting in the comments where you're watching from, either while you're watching this live at home in this moment, or if you're watching it after the fact, we would love to know where our footage is being reached. So I think we're ready. We're gonna turn it around a little bit. Hopefully you can still hear me. So I'm here out at the beach. It is empty, it is cold, and it is windy out here today. And we are experiencing about a 2-foot tide. So last week when we were on the beach, we had a positive tide of about 10.5 foot. Today we have a positive tide of 2 foot, meaning it's 2 feet, 2 vertical feet above the average of all the low tides. So it's not a negative tide just yet, but it doesn't mean that we can't see some interesting intertidal creatures. So the way that I know that we're standing in the middle intertidal zone is the presence of this green algae. So this green stuff right here is called ulva, and ulva is an interesting piece of algae. So, would you lift up a piece of ulva and show us how thin that is? This ulva is not a plant, it's a type of algae. And what's interesting about algae compared to plants is they're only a couple of cells thick in this case. So you can see right through it. You can see her fingertips. Really, really neat to see. And this piece of algae, if it breaks off, will continue to live. So we'll have lots and lots of this green algae sort of coming into bloom and really covering huge pieces of the tide, and it only lives in the middle intertidal zone. So we explored the high intertidal zone last week where we saw animals and evidence of animals that are really tough, living in hard shells and protected areas. What we're gonna look at today is a little more delicate animals, and I can already see a couple from right where we are. And they're doing their best to blend in and not attract attention, but right here, you can post in the comments if you think you know what this is. We've got an amazing creature. This is one of my favorite animals to talk about with school groups because this is an animal that we see on just about every school field trip that we lead. This is an animal really common in the intertidal zone. It's close relatives to jellyfish and coral. Anybody know what it is? All right, yeah, this is an anemone. It's hard to recognize right now while it's all closed up, but this anemone is called an aggregating anemone, and they are one of the weirdest creatures. Oh, check it out. Stina's found 2 more, 3 more, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're everywhere. The term aggregating anemone comes from the fact that they like to be together with others of their same DNA. So this is an animal that reproduces by splitting in half. So what likely has happened, these 2 anemones here on this rock are probably clones of one another. So when the anemone gets big, and this is about as big as these anemones get, stick your finger there for scale. Yeah, these are about 4 inches across. And when they get large like that, what will happen is they will break in kind of tear and stretch, and they get long like a hot dog in shape, and then they'll split. So this one right here is wrapping around this rock, and it's really stretching out, and pretty soon the center of it will pinch, and you'll see this anemone turn into 2 anemones, and then 2 become 4, and 4 becomes 8, and there's a really cool kind of exponential growth there that happens. Really weird way to reproduce. Yeah, not many animals can just split themselves right in half. When the tide is high, these animals have beautiful pink tentacles. I'm looking around briefly to see if there are any with their tentacles kind of exposed at the moment, but I think with the wind, most of them are all kind of closed up. Ooh, check it out! We found another creature. Good eyes, Stina.
I always like to be careful with these ones because it's a red rock crab, but it has no pinchers. So actually, this is a great crab for practicing our crab wrangling skills because you can't get pinched. Normally, this is a crab species that has a nice dark black on the tip of the pinchers, which will be coming out of these two spots here. This lovely red rock crab is, well, you can tell all crabs whether they're boys or girls by looking at the belly, and I'm curious if anybody in the comments can throw out a guess whether this crab's a boy or a girl. You know, I can tell by looking at the abdomen. This nice big wide flap is holding a pretty good clue right here. All of this blob are little crab eggs. There's going to be a couple thousand in here, and these little eggs are going to be held by the mom crab, and they will slowly hatch out into a planktonic stage. It's a little tiny baby crab larva. Will float around in the Puget Sound. We'll be doing a plankton lesson soon, so hopefully you get to take a look at some of those guys. They look wild, and then they start developing into these nice crabs here. Hopefully on our beach walk today we might come across some crab molts, which is an empty crab shell. That's how the crab gets bigger. Hopefully for this little lady here, she'll be able to shed this shell and start growing two new pinchers, and that will help her defend herself as well as gather food. So we can all wish this little lady good luck out here. It's tough being a mom with no claws, but we'll tuck you right back in.
Nice spot to hide there. All right, so let's walk along a little bit. I'll point out some other things. I'll try to keep my my voice close to the microphone of my phone so that you can hear over the wind. I know it's really difficult to hear, but we'll do our best. We've got some really fascinating algae here, some really pretty filamentous red algae. They love to live in this middle intertidal zone, fairly common. Here's some more evidence of animals. This is a varnished clam, a purple varnished clam, so it should be a nice kind of purple color on the inside there. Really common species to find intertidal. Oh, check this out. Nice. Here's a really cool animal, one of my favorites. This is a chitin, an animal with a very kind of interesting evolution. This is a species that's very much the same as it was during the time of the dinosaurs. So this animal is like a primitive snail, and instead of a spiraled shell along its back, they have these 8 plates along their back. They're kind of held in place by a part of their body that's called the girdle. So this piece right here is flexible. Let's see if I can lift up and show you the foot of this animal. Oh, look at that. There is a beautiful view of the foot of this chitin, and you can see the muscular foot that they crawl around, and you can also see the mouth. So that little mouth in the center houses a radula, which is like a rasping tongue that can scrape algae from the rocks. And this animal having this 8 plates along its back allows it to really conform to the surface that it's on. So because the shell was kind of down in the ground here like so, our chitin is not stuck tight to that rock. And they go about their day and night eating algae, and then when the nighttime is over, or when their foraging period is done, they come back and they'll stay in roughly the same spot. And I just noticed right next to it, right here, is another primitive snail called a limpet. The limpet has kind of a mountainy shaped shell. Really cool to see these two ancient species. They're pretty much unchanged from their fossil relatives that were around in the seas during the time of the dinosaurs. Very, very efficient and very interesting and fascinating design on this animal. All right, let's keep walking along, unless, you know, you do find something you want to show?
I found.
Oh yeah, look at. Okay, This is going to be hard for you guys at home, but can you see the little tube sticking up from the edge of the water? So you're just going to point some out. Yes, look at it. These are tube worms. And there's a bunch of different types of tube worms that are present here in Puget Sound. We have some larger ones that we see frequently underneath our docks. And you can see those during our Peer into the Night programs that we do in the wintertime months. I think Stina's looking for a nice bit. Oh yeah, here's one. Here's a nice big one. So the tube on these is about as large as your finger, where the smaller little tiny tube worms are significantly smaller. And if you visit this beach on a low tide, on a non-windy day, when it's calm and quiet down here, you'll hear the world's strangest sound. It sounds like a bunch of people zipping up their zippers all at once. And it's the sound of the worms inside their tubes moving up and down. Really kind of cool.
I like to call it a tube worm opera.
Tube symphony, maybe? I don't know if you guys can see. You can throw a like in the comments if you can see the squirts that are happening on the beach as we look down. There's a bunch of little tiny squirts of water coming up about a foot, maybe a foot and a half. Those are all evidence of clams that are moving beneath the surface. As the clams take the oxygen out of the water, they need to get new water that's full of oxygen, and so they'll kind of squirt. We also see lots of evidence of clams in the shells that are found here. Stina's got a big
Nice
butter
big
clam.
Butter clam. One nice key feature of that is this really dark big hinge. Also the nice concentric lines on the shell, as opposed to this steamer clam, which has the lines radiating out. Again, from last time, who knows what evidence this is from? It's the mark of the
The moon snail.
So, and then this actually, okay, this is a fun one. This little snail is a little bit of a lower intertidal species. It's called a dove snail. And if the wind's not too blustery every once in a while, I like to call these the Miss America snails because its little foot will start waving.
Like they're on a parade. They just wiggle their little foot around.
There. Maybe. There.
Maybe. All right, we got 45 people watching this, waiting for the snail, and I think he's a little stage fright. We'll keep our eyes peeled for one who's maybe a little more brave.
I know we posted a similar snail on our Instagram and Facebook feed of a Necarious snail doing quite the wave. So you can judge for yourself whether you think the dove snail or Necarious are better. Who's the true Miss America snail?
Who's better at waving? Oh, check it out, Stina. I see another snail relative, or at least evidence of them.
Is it cake frosting?
It looks a bit like cake frosting, or maybe tiny grains of rice, or some kind of weird, strange coil of goop. But this is the egg mass of a snail, probably a shaggy mouse nudibranch. And I'm actually going to flip this over because the chances that the snail or the slug has gone away from this is not too bad. Oh, but check it out. Okay, no sign of the slug who laid the eggs, but here's another beautiful chitin. So you can see those 8 plates and the girdle on there. Notice I'm touching it with one wet finger, so I get my finger wet and just touch gently. That helps to smooth my finger out so it's not rough on these creatures. It helps to keep my hand nice and cool. These are sea creatures. They would prefer to be underwater. And then the tide leaves them literally high and dry. So what we're looking at here is the eggs of a sea slug. A really cool frilly sea slug that eats these anemones that we see all around us. And it can incorporate the stinging cells of the anemone. When the female, well, I guess they're boys and girls, are what we call a hermaphrodite. When they lay their eggs, they start in the center and work outward and make a big coil. And all sea slugs do that. And you can identify usually which slug laid the eggs based on the size of the coil and how those eggs are arranged. So for like the sea lemon, which is one of my favorite nudibranchs, they have yellow eggs. That helps the eggs to blend in with the parents who are bright yellow. really, really cool. And we call these nudibranchs or sea slugs, and they are relatives to the snails and the chitons and the lympics. They're all in the mollusk family, or the mollusk phylum, I should say, one of the largest. Okay, you're gonna have to use your eyeballs. But I just saw a little clam, another mollusk, right here. And we'll see if I move the rock out of the way, if we can see that clam siphon. Give him a moment. Alright, he's feeling shy too. Alright, let's see what Miss Dina's looking at. She's kind of up here in our, what I like to call Crab Town, where we see lots of the smaller shore crabs. Oh, look at that! More mollusks.
Yeah, I'm gonna go see if I can find a second crab so you can compare a male versus a female. But for now, I'll leave you with this very lovely frilled dogwinkle.
Yeah, this
sounds like a name I made up, but it really is what they're called.
They really are called frilled dogwinkles, and they're a snail that's really common in the intertidal zone. This time of year, they're laying eggs. Here's a few more of those. You can see they're really nicely coiled body, and then the frills that gives them their name, the frilled dogwinkle. And they're tucked in here with a few other snails. There's some little periwinkle snails here, little guys, staying small, blending in the intertidal zone. Any luck finding crabs, Tina? All right.
All right. So we have two little green shore crabs here, hand situated, and we have a male and a female. And you'll notice that even though their size is different, the main important thing is to take a look at that flap on their belly. And that flap is what will help for any crab species tell you whether this crab's a male or a female. And so, like the crab earlier, we saw the red rock crab with the big wide belly flap. That's demonstrated on this nice little lady, only she's not carrying those thousands of eggs like that red rock crab was. And then we have the nice male here with the skinny pointy belly flap. Sometimes we like to say guys wear neckties and ladies are sweet like honey, so there's more like a beehive there, but whatever works for you to remember who's who is the way you tell a crab apart, whether it's male or female.
Okay, good, fine. And Sina's going to return these crabs right to the same rock that they were found underneath. Animals like crabs are typically somewhat territorial. And so we want to make sure that they're not being moved from place to place on the beach. That opens them up to almost like bullying, where one crab will kind of pinch another crab. That may be how our other crab that we saw, that red rock crab, how she lost her pinchers. Oftentimes crabs are pretty ruthless with one another. So when we see them on the beach, it's great to look at them and carefully touch them, but we always make sure that they're returned to their home. And that means the very specific rock that they were found underneath. All right, so let's walk around, see what else we can see. You can see there's a lot of this green algae here. That's that ulva. And there's two forms of ulva that are common on our South Sound beaches. There is the sheet-like ulva that we saw earlier that kind of grows almost like a big leaf. And then there is the stringy type ulva. Here's a good example of the stringy type. The stringy type ulva is called ulva intestinalis. And it gets its names because it looks like intestines or guts. All right, Stina's found another cool something.
So this one's called a spaghetti worm, and like the other tube worms, it has a protective tube to keep that little worm nice and safe. But instead of, well, it does build it on its own, but it uses all the shell debris that it finds in its habitat to be nice and disguised. So
like armor.
Like armor. And when this worm's sticking out, it looks a lot like spaghetti noodles. Of course, since the tide is low, that worm is sucked down, nice tucked in that little cave there. And when the tide comes up, those long spaghetti noodle-like tendrils will go hunting for food to give that worm some nice energy. So,
yeah, that's an animal that we call a detritivore. They're eating material called detritus, which is a fancy scientific name for scuff. Just the scuzzy, the brown, the smelly stuff at the beach, the little tiny bits of everything. That's what they're really going for. Here's another dogwinkle snail on the rock here, and then you can see the glue left behind by the barnacles that were once on that rock.
Ooh, those pink tentacles Rachel mentioned of our sea anemone. If you look really close, you can see the little pink stinging tentacles. What's pretty cool is if I were to touch that sea anemone, it feels kind of like it's sticky, like tape. And that's the sea anemone actually harpooning me with its little stinging cells. And if I was a small shrimp or fish, I might be that anemone's lunch. Luckily, my hands are too tough to feel the sting, and there's plenty of food around, so these guys haven't adapted to have a really powerful stinger like some tropical species. So it's kind of fun to give them a nice gentle touch and feel that sticky sensation.
Yeah, and when they're all closed in with their tentacles in, they look like a little green button, and the green comes from algae that's living inside their skin. So they almost have like a little green. Oh, Stina, you just nearly got squirted. There's no, I got squirted. Okay, we're in Clam Town. There's a clam right here, a nice big hole down inside there. There's another big hole. Ooh, and check out what's here, a hole, Stina. Tiny.
Oh my gosh!
Tiny sand dollars. So here's just the teeniest, tiniest little sand dollar here. Not surprising to find on this beach because you can see all the sand that's here and the big sand flats that are out there. Those little sand dollars are going to grow up, and they'll be about 5 inches across when they're fully grown. The sand dollars are alive when they're dark colored. So this one I can tell is alive. The other way to tell is to look underneath. Let me rinse this guy off. And in the very center of the sand dollar, if you can see a hole, that is their mouth. And a living sand dollar will never ever show you their mouth. So the sand dollar here is alive. Stina's found a dead one. The skeletons of sand dollars are called tests. This is a beautiful sand dollar test. This is called the eccentric sand dollar, is their name, because their flower-like pattern on their test is so striking. It's also slightly off-center, which helps the sand dollar to right itself. So you can see here the mouth open on the dead. The other thing to look for, and kids always get a kick out of this, is what do you think that hole is right there? If you answered butt, you are correct.
Ding, ding, ding.
The sand dollar uses its mouth in the center to pull in different types of plankton and algae, and those grooves that Stina's showing off are how the animal kind of funnels the food to its mouth. As it digests it, it then has to expel it, and sand dollars have a little butt. What's kind of interesting, and I do not know how this happens because this is an animal with no brain, no mouth, no way to really communicate, but somehow sand dollars, all of them, all stacked together, will go to the bathroom at the same time, which is crazy. The reason for that is they don't want to be eating while their neighbor is pooping, so they coordinate their bathroom with the tide. So as the tide's going out, everybody goes to poop. As the tide comes in, everybody eats. So you can see these sand dollars on the beach all together and wonder whether they're coming or going.
I have a prediction that they all use their shell phones to coordinate.
Oh, Stina. All right, let's keep walking along and see what other animals we can find. We're right about at the time of the low tide, and so our tide is about to turn back and start to recover the beach some. Ooh, here's a cool creature. Stina?
Nice oyster here. This is a nice example of the Pacific oyster, which is our non-native oyster species here in the Puget Sound. A lot of places will use these oysters on the beaches for recreators to come out and harvest because they grow fast into a nice big size that you can have a delicious oyster slurp. What's interesting about these guys is on a lot of our local beaches back in 2013, 2014, we didn't see them at all unless they were specifically put there by the state. And then in the last couple of years, we've seen this huge, basically, recruitment event of these oysters, and now they're everywhere. So you see, I mean, this is a pretty good sized one. I've seen one that's bigger than my foot. Like,
whoa.
There's definitely a lot of these out and about. And if you want to learn more about that, we'll be talking community science at some point. So oysters will come up again. But, I like to think of them as our intertidal scalpel. You have to really be careful. This is one of the reasons why we recommend nice closed-toed shoes or boots.
Closed-toed boots, that's the way to go.
These shells are sharp. Gotta watch out.
Also on this rock are some cool barnacles. These are called thatched barnacles because you can see the thatched-like shape of them. Here's a large thatched barnacle. And to give you some perspective, there's my thumb. This is a large type of barnacle.
So nice. You kind of have the two stages of this red algae, this Turkish towelette, or mastocarpus. It starts out as kind of this tar spot, and then it will bloom out in these nice leafy beds with a little kind of
Rough texture. It's hard to imagine that this is actually a living organism that turns into this. And for years, scientists thought they were two separate species, pretty much until they ran some DNA and figured out, oh, that's the same thing.
some of that green seaweed on it.
Oh yeah, more ulva. Algae on algae.
Woo.
All right. All right, so we're gonna just keep walking down the beach until we find something new. If you have questions, you can ask them in the comments. We've got Carly Vester, our communication specialist, is on and answering questions. Also, you can always ask questions of Harbor WildWatch through our messenger on Facebook. So if you're at the beach sometime after this quarantine period is lifted and you come across a strange creature you're wondering about, you can always give us a message and we'll do our best to answer what you've got. So here's another group of big thatched barnacles, really, really big, that you can see them almost moving their plates on the inside. Also, on this rock, here's another chitin. This is hard to tell. You'll have to take my word for it that that's a chitin. Another big snail. This is a tube worm casing. This is called a calcareous tube worm, or the calcium shelled worm. Here's another calcium worm with the beautiful red plumage. Ooh, and a huge chitin. This is a different species. This one has a girdle that's very kind of rough and bristly. Those big spots. What are you finding over here? Oh,
Finally a waving snail.
she says that it's not gonna wail. It's not gonna wave. All right, dove snails are shy,
Yeah.
or it's really windy.
Give it a block. Definitely sticking out a little bit more. I also found a nice mussel here. This is a favorite food of sea stars. They like these guys here. They'll use their little suction cup tube feet to open them up and spit their stomach out to have a nice, delicious.
We're kind of right at the top of the sea stars range, so we'll keep our eyes peeled and see if we can't find a sea star for you. In the meantime, lots of more sea slug eggs. Look and see if there's any slugs around. I don't see any. They must be a little bit deeper. A lot of the animals that are able to move will navigate with the tides. So as the tide comes in, they take advantage of the water and the waves pushing them forward. And then as the tide goes lower, they just follow it out. They want to stay underneath the water. It keeps them cool and wet. And if they can, that's where they want to be. A lot of these animals that can't move end up kind of just sticking out the tide. They only have to wait a couple of hours for the tide to change, but it can be really rough out there for them. Here we're in a bed of lots of this Ulva intestinalis. I just love that name. Oh, we've got a question here. Why do barnacles stay together? So barnacles are stuck wherever they stick. And usually any surface that's got room for one barnacle has room for many barnacles. and the ones that are able to survive will get bigger and kind of fill that space. A lot of times on really crowded rocks, we'll see almost like a skyscraper type arrangement where the barnacles, instead of getting wider, are only able to really expand upward. And some of them can get really kind of contorted growth patterns. The size of the barnacles is determined by, one, the species. So certain barnacles get larger than others. These ones right here these are acorn barnacles. They tend to stay fairly small. And then the thatched barnacles and even giant barnacles are present around here too. Oh, Sina's got something. I wonder what she's found. Ooh, more animals. We've got some gulls here. Lots of birds make use of the low tide to forage for food. Often you'll see skulls like this just lifting up animals they find and dropping them to break open their shells. Oh, Stina, you found such a cool creature.
The leather star. This is one of the many species of sea stars we find out here on our local beaches. This one I think is really cool because it's a lot smoother than most of our stars. It really has that texture of like wet leather. So a pretty good name.
I'm gonna get my fingers wet so I can feel this one. Oh yeah, very smooth.
And something I love about this one is if you smell it, it smells kind of like garlic or gunpowder. Has a really unique scent, and part of that is its defense strategy, which is unique to this star. There's also a sea slug out there that smells like a Jolly Rancher watermelon candy, but kind of interesting. And if I flip this over, you'll see it's using its tube feet to hang on to some lovely ova there. It has these nice rows that this species is able to kind of close up its tube feet. So that's like a protective layer. The middle is where its mouth is. And as we mentioned with those mussels, it'll actually spit its stomach out of its mouth onto its food, digest. And when it's all done, it'll put its stomach back inside and crawl onto its next meal. So you can imagine, if your school cafeteria or your family dinners or your romantic dinner date, if you all ate like sea stars, that'd be pretty gross.
Super gross, but amazing. Tell us what this little spot is.
Yeah, so this little spot is on all sea stars. It's called the madreporite, and it's a little filter because sea stars, they don't have any blood. All of the internal goo they have is seawater, and they use this little filter to keep all the plankton outside of their body, and then they basically work on a hydraulic system that operates their little tube feet, which here's one waving out there, and that can kind of suction and pull them along, so they're a very mobile creature compared to a lot of animals on the beach. Another thing I really like about them is that even though they don't have a brain, they have eyes. And I might give you a moment to guess how many eyes this species of sea star has. I'll give you a clue. It helps to count the legs. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 legs means our star has 5 eyes, and they're located on the very tip of each arm. And what I think is so amazing is that if this sea star loses this arm, not only does it grow it back, but it grows an eye right along with it. And now, it's important probably to mention that they're not eyeballs like you and I have. They're more like an eye spot, so they're going to sense that light and dark. Kind of like if I close my eyes and I look towards the light, I'll notice that I can look away and it will get darker. So, very cool find. These ones are really common here out on the sandspit.
We're at about a 2-foot height right now, but anything close to 0 foot tide or below, you can find sea stars out here. And Stina's going to place it back kind of right at the edge so we can let the sea star go about his day. Hopefully our seagulls don't find him. Well, I guess seagulls got to eat too, right?
And of course, it could be his or hers day. You can't really tell if a sea star's a boy or a girl unless you cut him open. And we don't do that here at WildWatch, so we just have to wonder.
All right, we'll look around and see if we find any more animals, but the wind is really picking up here on the sandspit, making it difficult for us to even hear one another speaking. So I can only imagine how difficult it is for you guys at home. More clam species here. Sometimes you can find a clam and pick it up and the animal will actually be inside. In this case, we have just the shell, empty, and we'll leave these shells on the beach so that they can become habitat for things like barnacles that might settle on them. Oh, Stina, what did you find?
We have, remember those frilled dogwinkles from earlier? These are their babies, or really their eggs, which houses the babies. That nice pink color lets us know that these are fairly mature, and if they haven't hatched already, will be hatching soon. See the tide's starting to come up here. But yeah, they kind of look like a grain of rice. So each one of these little cases is a little snail that will hopefully make it out, and it'll either feed somebody or it'll grow up to be a nice adult snail like the ones we saw earlier.
Awesome. All right, lots of anemones here. Each one of these little round donuts is one animal, and as they grow, again, they'll split, so we'll get more and more and more anemones here. Stina and I are really careful where we walk so that we're not accidentally squishing any creatures. If you'd like to know more about how to act on the beach, how to have good beach manners, one of the things we recommend is called beach etiquette, and that is to be a guest on the beach. And if you check out our YouTube page, I think Carly can put the link in the comments. There's a really great video from this week, me explaining how to be a good guest at the beach to some school kids. All right, so I think with that, we're gonna wrap up here. We're freezing, we're cold, and we'd like to go get warm and go back to our cozy homes. But we hope that you've been able to enjoy this virtual visit to the beach. Hopefully it makes being home and staying safe and healthy just a little bit more bearable. You can look for more content from us in the coming days and weeks. Make sure that you like our Facebook page. If you're so compelled to support Harbor WildWatch, we are a nonprofit and we would appreciate any donation that you'd like to make. You can donate right through Facebook on our website, harborwildwatch.org, or of course, if you'd like to make a larger donation, you can email any of the staff at Harbor WildWatch, and that email address is info@harborwildwatch.com. Again, if you've got questions, post them in the comments. We will have this video available for you to share, to like our page, to promote it. If you're social and you want to engage with us, at Harbor WildWatch on all social media platforms gets to us. You can share, you can repost, you can add us to your stories, all that great stuff. Seeing lots of hearts and likes out there. We appreciate every single one of them. Thanks for tuning in.
Learn, have fun.
Learn, have fun. And stay healthy and stay inside.